Hi, everybody. Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm so glad to see you all here again. I'm very pleased to bring in a new speaker, or not new speaker, you've done this before, yes. Another speaker for our lineup here on Wonders of the World. Ashley Cahill is faculty in LCC's Bachelor's of Teacher Education program. She's a former kindergarten teacher and has a master's in teaching as well as a graduate certifications in curriculum and adult education. In her free time, she enjoys traveling and snuggling her 4-year-old and 2-year-old. So please welcome Ashley Cahill.
Thank you. Does that sound okay? Okay, wonderful. Thanks for having me today. I want to start out by saying how I found myself in Saudi Arabia, because that's an important part of the story. My husband and I were both elementary school teachers, and we're hoping for a little bit of adventure. So we decided to apply for some international and American schools. We were thinking like, let's go to Austria or let's go to Germany or somewhere in Europe. And we were approached by an international school in Saudi Arabia. And we had multiple meetings with them. And we actually liked a lot of their philosophies. And we were really, really curious and interested about their school. So we interviewed with them and accepted positions. We accepted positions really having no idea what we were going to get ourselves into. So needless to say, we stayed for 6 years, which means we loved it. And we loved so many aspects of it. So today, I just wanted to share a little bit about our life in Saudi Arabia, things that surprised us, lessons that we learned. And then I want to leave ample time for questions because I experienced it, I know there's going to be things that you're probably curious about that I wouldn't even think to tell you. Because you don't know what you don't know. So I'm so interested also to answer any questions you have. So make sure if you have questions to write them down, and I'll be happy to share at the end. And let me make sure this. Any clicker advice? Oh, let's see here. Let's try that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so where is Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia is a kingdom ruled by the Al Saud family. It's home to Islam's 2 holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. And you might know it for the Islamic pilgrimage that happens there annually. It's a culture deeply rooted in Islamic traditions, and Arabic is its official language. I've included a world map, and then I also think it's important to know the countries that surround Saudi Arabia. There are 2 teeny tiny countries, Bahrain and Qatar, also called Qatar. And then the UAE. So I feel like most people, when I say that I lived in the Middle East, they say, how close were you to Dubai? Because that's most people's frame of reference. And I was about a 6.5-hour drive from the UAE where Dubai is located. And then you can also see to the north, we have Kuwait, Iraq, and Jordan. This is going to take us on a little flight. There's a little turbulence as we go through the atmosphere. And you can see the capital city is Riyadh. I'm curious, it's hard for me not to ask you all to like share and engage you. So turn to a partner. What do you notice about the landscape of Saudi Arabia? Yeah, I probably couldn't think of a more opposite place to move from than Washington State. Yeah, when we arrived, I know this might be a question, when we arrived, it was 123 degrees outside. Yeah, it feels like some people have probably been in that heat before, but to me, it felt like someone was taking a hair dryer and just like blowing it all over, or like when you open an oven to check on cookies and you get that. It's like that, but everywhere. So you breathe in and you're like, ugh. Yeah. Okay. So what we think of when we think of Saudi Arabia is often desert, but there actually is a lot of diverse landscape. So the picture of me in the middle there, this is in the Ruba Kali, which is called the Empty Quarter, and it's one of the largest sand deserts in the world, and that's where I lived, actually, almost in the middle of one of the largest sand deserts. This photo of me is about 30 minutes from my house. If you look to the photo on the left, we moved to a different school about 4 years into our trip, and that school was actually on the Persian Gulf. So that's the view from my front door, is that beautiful water with the palm trees. It was seemingly luxurious, but the humidity was epic. So you take 120 degrees and then you add humidity. And so you just look out your window and see the water. You don't actually go outside. And then something that many, many people don't know is the coral reefs of the Red Sea. So along the coast of the Red Sea by Jeddah is some really, really famous snorkeling locations. We did not get the opportunity to visit. That was on the other side of the country from where we were located. But you would sometimes maybe never imagine that you'd go to Saudi Arabia to snorkel, right? So most of Saudi Arabia is desert, but there were various landscapes. And there's also a mountainous region as well in the south. Okay, our life. That's my husband, Rob, who had only been to Mexico once and had never been out of the country other than that, and was brave enough to do this adventure with me. That's our house. So I'm sure people are curious, like, what do houses even look like there? It was a fourplex, so it was connected to other houses. The grass only stayed alive because our community required us to water it. Otherwise, grass would not grow naturally there. But they did have hopes of creating a vision of sort of normalcy by having a green front yard. But our backyard was just sand. So when we first arrived, we brought our cat with us. We didn't have kids at the time, so I had an 8-year-old cat, and I couldn't leave him. So we brought him on a 26-hour travel door-to-door airplane adventure. And we showed up, and it was the middle of the night, and I realized I didn't have any cat litter for him. So I just went in the backyard and scooped some sand and put it in one of our travel boxes, and was like, oh, handy. Never buy cat litter again. So yeah, some fun surprises there. You can see on the windows the white, it almost looks like curtains, but those are actually sunshades. So it helped keep your house, they were sort of reflective, like you would put in a car to reflect on a hot day. All the windows had those to save on AC costs. And our community had a phone number. It was 611. Similar to 911, but you dialed 611 if your air conditioning went out. And someone would show up within 30 minutes to fix it. And that's because you could die, right? Like the heat is so extreme that basically AC was life, really. Our community was pretty incredible in the sense that everything was so close that we drove a golf cart. So we were able to go 6 years only on using our bikes and driving I miss it, actually. I'm looking at it and I'm getting really nostalgic because that's like my friend, my golf cart. We traveled everywhere on our golf cart, and we had a small grocery store. We had a small medical facility where we lived in our community. We had a school, and there was a swimming pool and a tennis court and a sand golf course with maybe 5-6 holes of golf that you could do. And that was it. So if the weather wasn't so hot, you could walk everywhere. but it's really too hot to walk most of the year. So that was our preferred mode of transportation. And about half the people that lived in our town also just drove golf carts everywhere. Luckily, we did have neighbors that had a car. So when we wanted to go to a proper grocery store or go to a restaurant, you can see in the top corner, there is a restaurant in the big city that was about an hour away that we went to. The big city was special because they had an Outback Steakhouse. And so that was a really big deal because where we lived, we had no restaurants. And I don't know if you've ever not been able to order out. It's awful. My husband and I, neither of us like to cook. So suddenly we found ourselves having to cook with all these ingredients that we weren't familiar with. So it was a really good experiment in discovering new foods, but we always missed being able to just go to a restaurant. So sometimes we'd caravan as teachers to the big city and try a restaurant. The big city also had fun things like escape rooms, and they had a place called Billy Bees, which is kind of like Chuck E. Cheese for kids. And they had an IKEA, which was really amazing because that's where we ended up getting all of our furniture and also a lot of stuff for our classroom. So our big city was called Kobar, and it was, I don't know the population, but they had enough stuff to make us feel like, okay, we're living semi-normal life. I'm curious if you've noticed the discrepancies in what people are wearing in that bottom photo between men and women. You can see that I have my abaya on. My friend Abby unbuttoned her abaya, which was haram, probably forbidden at that time, but I think she was doing it for the photo. But you can see the men can wear whatever they want. So I'll talk more about that coming up in a future slide. Okay, I wanted to show some pictures of our actual neighborhood. So the top view is the view of the sort of housing area next to us. And the top left is the street. So you can see all the houses all along the street. The road is where we would drive our little golf cart to and from school. And it was really neat because our students also lived in this community. So everybody knew everybody, which is tricky in some ways, but also really beautiful in other ways. So if somebody was sick, especially a teacher, your students would show up to your door with like cooked meals, right? And that wasn't out of the ordinary. Something that was really neat is kids would ride their bikes anywhere, late into the night, sort of till the street lights came on, right? Because everybody knew everyone, that there was a real sense of safety and security there. So it wasn't unusual for us to see our students as we'd be driving home on our golf cart. All our students would be riding their bikes and playing at the playground, and it was just packed full of kids. As we always talked about how it was sort of like a 1950s feeling. But students, mostly the children, would be out late because it's so hot. So kids couldn't really play outside till the sun went down about 6:30 p.m. So everyone would eat at early dinner, sun would start to go down, and then it would be packed full of kids. So I'm assuming I took that picture probably in the heat of the day. This picture here is the view right outside of our town. So you can see that's what it should look like where we lived if they hadn't developed it. Just sand, mounds and mounds of sand. So really we were sort of an oasis, so to speak, in the middle of the desert. Okay, our community was really amazing. Specifically talking about our school, we had over 70 different nationalities represented in our town. 70 different nationalities. Our students often spoke 3 or 4 languages. I once had a kindergartner come up to me and he said, Mrs. Cahill, how many languages do you speak? And I said, oh, buddy, I only speak 1. I wish I spoke more. How many do you speak? And he said, 3. He's 5. He said, I speak English, French, and Arabic. And I said, mashallah, which is like, that's great, buddy. You can see that within our community, we were invited to many cultural events. there was a really high population of folks from India that lived in our town. And so you can see the photo on the left is of a celebration that we were invited to. I think it was Diwali, but I'm not 100% positive. And we didn't have all of the traditional clothes, so all the gals in the community came together and dressed us, so we could arrive in the proper cultural garb. So it was just really beautiful. Everyone was always so thrilled to share their traditions and culture with everyone else. It was amazing. Also, you can see in the middle picture, that's Thanksgiving. So there we were celebrating Thanksgiving. We were all Americans, so we were the only people that really celebrated Thanksgiving. That's our little crew there. So we found a turkey, and this is at my friend Maria's house. She was my backyard neighbor, her and her husband, Tom, and they actually painted the inside of their house. So their house was the same as ours. We never painted it, but you could if you wanted to make it feel more home-like. And that's the little table setting for Thanksgiving. So we did celebrate American holidays as well. And the picture on the far right, we came home once. My husband was a middle school teacher for some of the years, and we came home once, and our whole driveway was decorated with student chalk letters. So his middle schoolers had gone over to our house when we weren't home and wrote notes to him, thanking him for being their teacher. So we showed up, and there was just probably 20 messages from his students. So that's from Condi. Dear Mr. Cahill, you are so nice to everyone. Every day I'm excited to see you. So of course my husband just like lost it. It was one of the coolest experiences. So that is part of the beauty of living in this small community, in this tight-knit community. And it was also a really beautiful thing where teachers were respected and revered as an important role and part of the community. And so it was neat to see how that transmitted to the students. And so when we would show up at the little commissary, we called it a commissary, the little store, we'd always see our students, and we felt famous, you know, and they'd lose. I felt like Taylor Swift. It was amazing. And so when we moved home, it'd be weird. We'd go to the grocery store and it'd seem really uneventful. What's happening here? Our school, every year we'd have an international day. And like I said, so you can see like that's just our paraeducators in that picture all the way to the right. You can see our paraeducators wearing their traditional garb of their country. In the middle, that's just our Azerbaijan group of kiddos, but kiddos sat in their with their countries. Some kiddos would walk with multiple countries because many of our students had parents from 2 different countries. And we would do an international parade, and we invite all the families, and the students would all go to the stage, and the national anthem of their country would play, and they'd wave and carry their flag and walk off. And it would take about 2.5 hours to get through all the countries, but it was really beautiful. So you can see our counselor there dressed as Lady Liberty. There was a couple American folks, and so we never knew what to wear, so she got creative one year. But it was always a really beautiful event and helped showcase the diversity of our country, of our school, rather. In preparing for this presentation, my husband and I, we kept a blog while we were there to be able to sort of stay connected with our families back at home. And I read the blog post that he had written when he first got into his classroom. And he said, I have 22 students that speak 17 different languages, and I have 5 students who don't know any English at all. This is when he taught 2nd grade. But he said, so many of my students speak multiple languages that they're able to coach each other and help the students who don't know English yet. So it was a really beautiful, really beautiful place to be. I do have one story where I taught kindergarten, and I had a lot of students who, even if they spoke English, it was like they were taught like English, like European English. And so I asked one of my students, oh, it's really hot. Why are you wearing pants? And about half my class just started cracking up. And I thought, what is so funny? I couldn't figure it out. And pants are underwear to them. So they thought their teacher was talking about underwear. And so one of them finally told me, and I thought, oh gosh, okay, I have a lot to learn. I read Harry Potter, that's not in there anywhere. So yeah, it was fun. Okay, this is our classrooms, especially for my future teachers out there. They might be wondering, like, can you get all the same stuff? Does your classroom look any different? We packed a lot of stuff with us to take so we could set up our classroom how we wanted it. But our classrooms were really similar to our classrooms here in the States. That's me and one of my students. That's my student actually who speaks Arabic and French and English. But we still had all the bulletin boards. I mean, our school ran very much the same. Our curriculum was all American curriculum, as the goals of this school was to prepare students for universities in the United States. So we taught, even when it was strange, even when the curriculum sometimes didn't seem to fit, we still taught them American-based curriculum. And that's my husband's classroom over there. He wasn't as into decorating as me, and that's fine. But you can see like desks are the same. But you can see that was Super Reader Day. But if you look at my tutu, you'll notice it doesn't look super fancy. And that's because it's not easy to buy stuff. There's no Amazon. Well, at least there wasn't Amazon when I was there. So I had to take a string and then take tulle and make my own little tutu. Because really, it teaches you to be crafty with what you have, because they don't have a lot of shops where you can just go out and buy something. So imagine our surprise when we came back and Amazon was this thing, Amazon Prime, and you just order things show up at your door. It was bad news. Okay, so when we very first got the jobs in 2013 and moved overseas, women in Saudi Arabia had just been awarded the right to drive or to ride bikes. And you can see in the picture at the bottom, that's me getting my Saudi driver's license. The last year I was there, women were awarded the right to drive. So that's me and all my teacher friends, and we went and took the driver's test and got our Saudi driver's license. So I have a lot of notes on here that I want to go over. So Saudi Arabia has undergone significant modernization in recent years, particularly in the advancement of women's rights. So in 2013, they allowed women to ride bicycles. And in 2018, women gained the right to drive. There's been additional reforms. Something that's really controversial about Saudi Arabia is their guardianship laws, that women cannot own things. Instead, the man closest to the woman in her life owns the things that she, in theory, would own. So the guardianship laws are being loosened currently. And most recently, I believe it was last year, the abaya rules have been loosened. So now women are no longer required to wear abayas in public. So you can see we're all wearing abayas there. They had to be black. We did sometimes cover our heads with hijabs, but that's only when we would be in like government buildings, if that makes sense. So when we're out in public at IKEA or what have you, we would just wear our abayas. So now most of the people in that photo are still there teaching, because people don't leave, because it's really, there's so many beautiful and amazing parts about being there. But I recently saw a picture of Maria driving to IKEA herself without an abaya, and I thought, I would have never thought that. And one of the other signs of modernization is music. There's some debate, but for a lot of parts of Saudi Arabia, music is haram, which is forbidden. So like a lot of my students would not go to their music class. They would have parent signature. But when we were there, our cultural center brought in the London Orchestra to play the whole Harry Potter soundtrack. And so I was able to go to that, and I saw all these Saudi kids in their Harry Potter costumes. enjoying this orchestra performance, and it was really a beautiful and transitional part of the country. It sort of signaled what was to come. This this Vision 2030, and that's a lot because the king passed away, I believe, in 2015, and his son is now ruling, and he has visions of modernization. I want to talk about our cultural experience. So many Bedouins in Saudi Arabia have transitioned from traditional nomadic lifestyles to a more settled urban living. While some still live in rural or desert areas raising livestock such as camels and goats, a large portion of the population lives in cities now. But despite these changes, many Bedouins continue to honor their cultural heritage, preserving customs such as storytelling, poetry, and music. Hospitality remains a core value. Even with modernization, some Saudis have begun to promote the Bedouin lifestyle and have gone back to it. So they retire and then they go back to the Bedouin lifestyle upon retirement. So I want to introduce you to our friend Garyon. So Garyon is one of the folks that began pushing to return to the Bedouin lifestyle. He welcomed expats to his camel farm often. We were able to visit 3 times, and he was extremely hospitable. His talent was storytelling. So I want to share just a couple of Garyon's stories. He comes from a family of 11 children, and he said that when he grew up, his family lived in a tent in the desert, and that when his mom was giving birth to him, she left the tent and went behind a sand dune. She labored alone, and when once he was born, she picked him up and brought him back into the tent and presented him to the family. Yeah, fascinating story. So he told me once that when in his community, when you turn 12, you have a rite of passage. So his father took him out into the desert with a camel, a bag of dates, and a small satchel of camel milk, and said, "If you are my son, you will find your way back home." And he was about 3 days from home, and that he had a rope, and he tied the camel's leg to his own leg. So when he slept, the camel wouldn't wander off, because the magic is the camel knew the way home. So all he had to do was follow the camel home and survive 3 days in the desert when he was 12. Luckily, he made it home. The thing I want to share most about Garyon is he was extraordinarily welcoming, and he told us something about Saudis. He said, "I wish Americans knew actual Saudis more," because he said, "This is our core value. You will come to our home. We will feed you, provide you lodging for 3 days, no questions asked. It is not until the 3rd day that we ask you, why are you here?" And that really stuck with my husband and I, because we had moved there only seeing what we knew about Saudis on the news, right? And this amazing level of hospitality. He didn't know us, and every time we came to visit him, he put on the biggest fanfare he could. And I just thought, no one's ever done that for me in the States. They don't know me, and they invite me into their home, and they cook for me, and I meet their family. So we were really touched by the hospitality of the Bedouin people. So camel farms hold a really special place in Saudi culture. Camels are often referred to as ships of the desert, because they were so essential for trade and transportation. They also provide milk and meat and wool. Many, many things are made out of camel hair in Saudi. Today, camel racing is one of the most popular sports. So Garyon had always joked, because my husband and I, we were married 10 years before we had kids. So a big deal over there was like, kids are so beloved and special. So all the Saudis would say, "When are you having kids? When are you having kids?" And then Garyon would always joke, if you name your first child after me, I will buy them a very expensive camel." Needless to say, that did not happen. We came home before we had kids, but Camels are really precious, and some camels are valued like up to $150,000 if they're good racing camels. So they're really prized possessions of the people. We did, is food next? I'm curious. Okay, so you'll see to the right, kapsa. Garion would always serve us kapsa in a big plate on the floor, and you'd sit and eat. You'd sit around it and eat. And we never knew what the meat was. So finally, on our last trip, we got brave and we said, Garion, what's the meat? And he said, very young camel, just for you. I said, oh, we should not have asked, but we wanted to be respectful of the culture. So meals are incredibly important to the Saudi people. Meals are shared with family and friends. Hospitality and connection is huge. I couldn't imagine. We shared meals. That would be one of the biggest things, is sharing meals with lots and lots of families. I can't imagine someone having a phone out during a meal. That would be really incredibly offensive. The whole point of eating together is connection, and meals last a long time. And kapsa represents that because it's one big bowl that everyone shares, and people eat with their hands together. But the first thing that happens whenever you walk into someone's house, and this could be if you even show up at their door. Like once my student left something, I don't even remember what it was, but their backpack or something in my classroom. So it's easy. On my golf cart, I just popped over to their house and knocked on the door and dropped it off. Oh boy, that mom ushered me in. Sit, sit, sit. You get offered dates and you get offered kahwa, which is Arabic coffee. And it's made with cardamom. It's really thick and strong, and you just get a teeny tiny bit. And that's what you do. It's a symbol of generosity, and you visit. And before you talk about business, you visit and you connect. So it's just, yeah, really, food it would always seem to be a really important part of all of our experiences and connection with all the families that we met. Okay, the language. So Arabic holds immense cultural and religious significance. It's the language of the Quran, Islam's holy book. There are classical Arabic, which is what's used on the news and in newspapers. Then each country and region sort of has their own dialect. So Egyptian Arabic is really different than Arabic in Saudi Arabia. They even have different words for like yes and no. So it can be a little bit complex there. But the country's home to many expatriates. So I would say that for us, the most beneficial language for us to have learned, if we got to pick, would have been Urdu, or like a language spoken in Pakistan, or Hindi, because a lot of folks were from India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. But today I'm going to teach you some Arabic words. You can see underneath the Arabic script. So it's very different than English script in its style and structure. Arabic is written from right to left. It has a flowing cursive. It has 28 letters, and each letter takes a different form depending on its position in the word. That's tricky. So vowels in Arabic are often not written as full letters, but indicated through the marks. So you can kind of see the marks on top. And Arabic is a root-based language where words are often derived from three-letter roots. Okay, so I'm going to expect you all to repeat after me. We're going to learn to say hello. We're going to say merhaba. Your turn. Merhaba. Try it again. Merhaba. Mumtaz. Good job. Okay, we're going to say thank you. It's shukran. Shukran. Yeah. My favorite Arabic word is inshallah. It translates into God willing, but it's more than just a word. It's a way of life. So times and deadlines and things like that were very fluid when we were there. And so if you had a dinner date with someone, they'd say, I'll see you at 6, inshallah, which means 6, 6:30, 7. So it's really a way of life, and it's also a way of life of like God will take care of it, right? So it's a really sort of laid back So it was hard to break that word out of my vocabulary because we'd even use that speaking English, with our friends, just because there's not really an English equivalent. So hopefully is the best equivalent that I could find. You all try that, inshallah. Yeah. The last word is one of my favorite words as a kindergarten teacher. It's yilla. You have to say it like from your throat. Yilla, 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 yilla. Let's go, let's go, let's go. So it's better even than saying let's go. It has like an energy about it. So I'd have 25-year-olds behind me, and I'd be like yilla, 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 and they would know what that meant. So those are some of my favorite or more important words. Okay, shukran. Thank you. I am happy to answer questions. I also brought organic dates for everyone to try. If you've never had a date, I'd love for you to try it. Please know there is a pit in the middle. So I did bring napkins for you to put the pit, but this is a traditional date holder. I'm sure it has a name that we were gifted when we left from one of our families. So I was really happy to be able to use it today. So I'm going to pass this around with the napkins. Please try one. If you have allergies and you want to know what's inside, you're welcome to look at the box. I also brought some money as well as some, this was for making coffee, a traditional item, and some artwork from some local Saudi artists. And I brought my driver's license because it might be interesting just for you if you want to take a look. But what questions might you all have for me? Yeah.
Was all music forbidden or just Western music specifically, or
All music.
all music? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But that's definitely loosening up now. And music is a really important part of social culture in a lot of Islamic countries. So it's just more in the really strict Islamic countries that music is haram. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch how big the community was that you lived in.
Yeah, we had about 750 people.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And a lot of children then.
A lot, yeah, I would say about 350 were kids. Yeah.
I just watched a program about the royal family from Saudi Arabia, and they had just donated like several $billions for grants, like $31 billion to study aging. Are they particularly concerned about their aging population, do you think?
That's an interesting question. There has been a shift. We went to Dubai, and Dubai is very different than Saudi in the sense of they put a lot of money into tourism. And Saudi is dependent upon oil for their money. So when we were in Dubai, there's the king of Dubai said, my grandfather rode a camel. And he said, my grandfather rode a camel. My grandfather rode a camel. My father drove a Buick. He said, I drive a Mercedes. If I don't plan for my country properly, my son will be back on a camel. And so they had this vision of the future far before Saudi did. But now with this younger king, Saudi does have this vision for the future. So I can only imagine that they're probably putting money into science. I know they're putting money into universities. They're putting money into tourism. So I think they're trying to expand, or I know there's a word for it when you put your money in a lot of different places. Diversify their economy. So that could be part of that, because when we were leaving, they were starting to put a lot of money into sciences, and they were even bringing international scientists in.
Did you feel as a woman that aside from things like driving, that you had limitations put on you in your own community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say if you think of it like throwing a rock into a pond, that within my community itself, I didn't, because it was so international. But then in the small town right outside of our community, it felt a little bit strange. But then in the big city, I definitely felt not necessarily othered, but also like very clearly I'm not Saudi. So it's tough to say how much attention was drawn because I'm not Saudi or because being a woman. But there definitely were more restrictions on women. It did sometimes feel strange in that way. But also in some ways it was nice because I just think like walking through American grocery stores and seeing magazines of like women post like growing up as a woman, you often get a lot of input on what you should look like, right? And how you should dress and look in a bathing suit. And it was nice in Saudi because there was nothing like that, right? So, so in some ways it was refreshing to not walk through a grocery store and be inundated with like scantily clad women all the time. So, yeah, it was a different perspective.
So, oh Jesus, when I when I was studying in Dublin and I ventured outside into the more rural areas and interacted with people who were like classical Irish farmers, there was a strong disdain for like Dublin. Did you find that with Bedouins in like Dubai?
Interesting. Um, I never got the sense from the Bedouins that they resented the city folk, so to speak. But also, I, I I didn't speak very good Arabic, so I bet if I could communicate with them more clearly, we might have been able to get more to the heart of that. But yeah, but communication was very surface level just because my Arabic was so limited. But yeah, that is an interesting, I bet there are some Bedouins who resent like the big city lifestyle.
Did you get to go into the mountainous areas to see what they were like?
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get to travel to the mountain region. It's really close to Yemen and is actually off limits for Americans.
Oh.
So the the war in Yemen, the rebels can actually fire drones and rockets into Saudi. And so they would target anyone who was sort of in that southern region. So we were always kind of watching the travel warnings, and we were always usually at a 3, which is a pretty high travel warning. But the travel warnings would always say like, don't travel south because there's kidnappings and other things like that. So unfortunately, I've heard the mountain landscape is really, and there's actually, I believe it's National Geographic has a program called Wild Arabia, where they just focus on the Arabian Peninsula and the amazing wildlife there. And they do go into the mountains, and there's like really unique animals. So unfortunately, we did not, but maybe one day. Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I was wondering about the women riding bicycles and driving. I didn't get the years for those.
Yeah, it was 2013 is when they were won the right to ride bicycles, and then 2018 is when we got the right to drive. Yeah.
Did you have a chance to travel to any other surrounding areas? Like you said, Dubai, any place else around?
We were so tired of the heat that when we got to travel, we tried to travel like, so we went to London a lot because we missed we missed Washington. So we'd go to London and be like, it's raining. So that's another funny thing is when it would rain, our students would lose their mind because it only rains a couple times a year. So like we just go outside and get soaked, because it was just so, it's like when it snows here and the kids get all wacky, like that would, when it rains there, that's what would happen. But no, we went to the UAE. We really wish we could have gone to Jordan because Jordan is a really beautiful and amazing country. But we did go to Egypt a couple times. When I was in college, I did my study abroad in Egypt. And so it's a country that's really special and near and dear to my heart. So I'd go back and see friends and things there.
You mentioned that when some people retire, they go back to the Bedouin life. What is that?
Yeah. So when some Saudis, when they would retire from their business or living in the city, sort of how like folks here, they retire and they might go to Reno or, I mean, I don't know, go live a new lifestyle. Some retired folks in Saudi would go back to the Bedouin lifestyle. So they would basically build a compound out in the desert and start camel farming. And they would invite, and their kids, compound living with your family was very common. So to them, when we said we didn't live with our parents, that was strange because they had this really beautiful system where everyone would help raise the kids, right? And aunties and uncles and everyone would sort of be in this giant compound, and they'd all have dinner together, right? And grandma would usually be making the dinner. So that would sort of be, you know, they'd live in the big city and have an apartment. And then when they retire, they'd go buy a compound in the desert and start camel farming or goat farming, sort of trying to get back to your roots, so to speak.
Okay, are there any other questions?
So you had mentioned the school was kind of built around them, prepping them for American universities, and the neighborhood you lived in was very diverse. Was that neighborhood built around this school, and was that the reason why there was so much diversity in such a small area?
Yeah, so Saudi has a big expat community because they need really diverse job force, and they can't source that often from just the Saudi people. So it's a really popular place for people to move to who are like, we had a lot of engineers and pilots, and it's interesting. One of the few other Americans that moved there was the fire chief. He moved from Texas, and Saudi liked to find the people that were the best at what they did anywhere in the world and bring them there with this sort of vision of we're going to create this really perfect place. So in their vision, teachers from America were very highly trained. So for us to get the job, we had to have 3 years of teaching experience, and we also had to have a current teaching certificate. So it's not like some of the international schools where like you have a Teach English certificate and you go over there, like they only wanted American teachers who were currently teaching American curriculum to bring over. So yeah, it was a really interesting perspective, sort of this outsourcing of the best of the best. So they brought a lot of engineers from Nigeria and South America were really big. But yeah, it's interesting, and they pay really well. And so, I mean, and that's the fact of the matter is they pay people really well. So when you're making one rate in your home country and someone offers to pay you much, much more by moving to a maybe not so desirable place, a lot of people would do it. So for a lot of our families, especially our families from Nigeria, it was changing their kids' lives because their kids would now be able to get into an American university because they received the American education. So yeah.
Okay, one more question.
Are there different seasons besides or is it just hot all the time? I mean, you said it did rain a little bit, but not maybe enough. So thank you for doing this.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Okay, so how we would always say is we would say it stays miserable till Halloween, and by Easter it's miserable again. That was sort of our Halloween, it would be like you would still be sweating and it would be pretty miserable. And then Easter, it would start again where you step outside and it would be miserable. We ended up in a really interesting situation where another teacher, the preschool teacher, got hired the same year as us, and she came from Shelton, Washington, which is just so strange. And she ended up being one of our neighbors. And so I remember the first night over there, her and her husband, their kids were grown and left. So they kind of took us under their wing because this was the first time they were living without their kids. Their kids had just gone to college. And then this was our first time, like, we felt like we were still kids kind of. So they called us and they said, come over to our house. We all just got here and we'll make you dinner and we'll play cards or something. So me, seeing it's dark outside, I put on a sweater because here, no matter how hot it is during the day, at night, it's still chilly. And I walk outside and it was so hot. And I looked and it was 93 degrees. It was 8 p.m. at night. So Seasons, I have this funny memory where I really missed fall while I was over there because there was no fall. It was just hot and then a little less hot. And so my friend Maria, who's in a lot of these pictures, she's an artist. So I told her one day, like, I really miss fall. I miss pumpkins. You can't find pumpkins there. One year we found them, but they were $36 because they don't grow there. So someone had to import pumpkins. So we used watermelons to make jack-o'-lanterns because you could find watermelons there. I told her I miss fall, I miss fall. So she went and painted me a little fall picture on a canvas and brought it to me, just all the fall colors. So there's no seasons. You do miss it. But December and January are beautiful. It's like in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, and we would get shamals or dust storms, sandstorms. So when the season would shift from super hot to not as hot, we'd get some huge dust storms like you wouldn't even believe, and sandstorms. So that's when you knew, oh, cold air is coming or warm air is coming, when their epic sandstorms would happen. You'd have to roll up wet towels under your doors because otherwise the sand would just, anyway, I don't miss that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to our audience for coming and for great questions. And thank you to Ashley, our presenter.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you. Feel free to come up and look at some of these items if you'd like.
Yeah, please come out, check out the front table here and come back next week. We have Louis Lapierre and Adrian Gottschalks will be presenting The Buzz on Ecosystem Services. So please join us again next week.